Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James, and unfortunately, no Stephen George. Steve is off on the jolly the weekend, so he sends his regards, but he's having a little break as well, so fair play to him there. But we do have a co-host guest, which is Quinn Tostado. I'm going to be bringing Karen in just a few minutes. But I'll just say to everybody, happy Valentine's Day to all the lovers out there. If you're in a relationship, I hope it's been fun. If you're single, there's somebody out there for you, trust me. You just have to hold on, be patient. They are there. Right, okay, now, communication channels. We'll knock off them, and let you know what they are, and then we'll fill out the other bits and pieces as well.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Right, communication channels are, you have the chat room on OYM Radio. You also have the chat room on People's Internet Radio. You can get us on Facebook as well, and you can get us on TuneIn Radio as well. All the details are on the Facebook webpage. You don't have to have a Facebook account to see all the details, to see the OYM Facebook page. You can go over there and all the details are on there, find out information. And to be honest with you, we used to send out loads of emails for links coming into the show. But we've decided now that when links come in, if they're pretty good, what we'll do is we'll put them up on Facebook because people can see them there. And we have a good, I think we have about 1,450 likes on Facebook. So you can always pop over there. You don't have to have a Facebook account to have a look at that. But we're going to bring in our co-host and guest this evening. Good evening, Karen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Alan. Thank you very much for having me. And hello to all your guests. It's kind of nice to be here. I can talk to them instead of just chat at them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we don't know what the subject matter is going to be. We're going to talk about anything and everything. But what I'll do is I'm going to just read out a few things first, Karen, and then we can crack on. We can then bring Richard in. Just to say that, and obviously you probably heard this as well, Karen, that one of our top whistleblowers has moved over to the spirit side, which is astronaut Edgar Mitchell. He passed over during the week. I'm sure you probably heard about that.
I have to claim ignorance to that. I heard about Scalia dying, but I didn't hear about the astronaut, the one who went to the moon or didn't go to the moon, or
Yeah, well, that's
shot in the back lot.
That's an argument in itself, isn't it? Whether you went to the moon or not. But Edgar Mitchell was one of the astronauts that came out, and he said, there are ETs there are UFO crafts, and it's all being covered up. And he died this week, and we were hoping to try and get him on the show last year, and his people said, oh well, not just now, maybe down the road. But we never got around to getting him on the show, which is a pity. It would have been very good to get him on. And I don't. Well,
you'll have to see just what a good psychic you are, and maybe you can channel him.
I can't see that happening for some reason. But yeah, so that's a pity. But onwards and upwards anyway. Right, and again, one more reminder for the Pain Genie course, which is going to be held down in Inch Beach, down in County Kerry next weekend. Myself, unfortunately, Steve won't be able to go, but I'm hoping to be able to get down next week, and I'll be doing a couple of interviews as well as obviously doing a refresher on the Pain Genie course. If you want to go down, it's next Saturday and next Sunday, and the website is 21stcenturyenergymedicine.com/scanner training C34.html. If you go over to 21stcenturyenergymedicine.com, or I think it's on paingenie.com, you'll actually see the information there. But go over to 21stcenturyenergymedicine.com and you'll see it there. Now, apparently, there's 4 spaces left on it. And if you contact Richard on the website, the 21stcenturyenergymedicine.com website, and you say that you heard it on OYM, it's half price. Okay, you half price discount if you mention OYM to Richard, and there's 4 spaces left on the course. So if you want to do that, if you fancy going down. Now, for anybody in the area that's down near Skellig Hotel in Dingle, at 8 p.m. on the 19th, which is a Friday, there's going to be a seminar called The Truth About Cancer and Its Resolution. The seminar is going to be run by an expert in the field of resolving cancer naturally. Now, this is definitely going to be worthwhile going. I can't go into too much detail, but I believe it's a free seminar as well. As far as I know, it's a free seminar. If there is a small, maybe it's a donation or something, but I'm pretty sure it's free. But if you go down to the Skellig Hotel at 8 p.m, you could ring them up actually and probably find out. But it's all about cancer and how to cure cancer naturally. A very, very worthwhile seminar to go. I'm hoping to go down on the Friday, see the seminar, and then I'll be doing the Pain Genie on the Saturday and the Sunday. That's the plan of attack. We'll see what happens anyway. The world
You've had great success with that, haven't you?
Brilliant with the Pain Genie. It's been fantastic. Yeah, definitely.
So has it helped pretty much everyone you've used it on?
The majority of people, yes. I'd say 8 out of 10 people that I've helped, they've either got the pain is completely gone or else been reduced to just a small niggle.
And do they have to continue to have sessions to completely reduce it? Or to keep up with it?
Well, there is a difference between acute pain and chronic pain. Acute pain is when if you hit your hand off a table or something, that would be an acute pain. That'd be an instant pain. You could treat that probably with one treatment. But a chronic pain would be like back pain. And basically what happens is that the Herring's Law says that you heal from your head down, your organs outwards, and back in time. So if you imagine the tip of the iceberg above the water, and if you take off the top part of the iceberg, another bit pops up, and you take another bit off, another bit pops up. So with the Pain Genie, you do probably multiple treatments, and you heal back in time until the pain goes. So that's kind of how it works.
So it's layering.
Yeah, basically layering. And so depending on the amount of treatments depends how long the person had pain. And you just go back and you keep treating them, and it goes back in time with the healing. We've had some great success with the Pain Genie, and we were convinced. I mean, we said to Richard, put your money where your mouth is, and Richard came up and he treated me, treated Steve, and treated Steve's wife. And Steve had frozen shoulder for years. And 10 minutes of treatment, and he had 5 days of pain-free shoulder.
Wow, so, when we think about energy and stuff like that, it's too bad we can't heal pains that are not us, like the big pain of, Obama and Clinton and stuff like that. Like from a distance, if we could clear their energy, wouldn't that be awesome?
Well, I'll tell you.
So they wouldn't be a pain.
Well, with the Schumann frequency of the Earth actually rising, that kind of negativity and the psychopathic tendencies they have, they might be clearing themselves. I mean, they might be able to manage. This is kind of what's going on. Maybe there's going to be a massive clearance. But we'll talk to Richard about that when we get in and get his take on it. We'll all talk about that. I've just one more article to read out, and then we'll get Richard in. And this is on a website called theliberal.ie. And it's about election 2016. As you probably know, Karen, I don't know whether you know, that over here in Ireland we're having an election. And our Taoiseach, which is our Prime Minister in Ireland, is the most hated Taoiseach in the history of Ireland. I mean, to see people follow him, he's walking on the street surrounded by the police, which we call the Gardaí over here, and people are chanting and calling him a traitor and everything else. And no, I don't remember any other Prime Minister or Taoiseach in Irish history that has ever been so despised by the people as he has. It's unbelievable. So, what they're saying here is, his name's Enda Kenny. So, it says here, through the Liberal.ie, Kenny said to be very fearful of losing power. The Taoiseach is said to be petrified that he'll be out on his ear if the electorate don't keep him and his cohorts in their cushy jobs. Kenny has seen major opposition to many failed and imposed policies, but none more than the Irish water fiasco. Over here, they're trying to charge us again for water. Water is the new blue gold, and they're trying to sell it off and privatise it, and we already pay for water through our taxes, and they want to charge us again. This is the whole farce that's going on. The ludicrous water charges literally turned the country on the Mayo Fine Gael politician. That will be his downfall. The water charges over here, and them trying to stop. I wouldn't mind, but the water over here in Ireland is fluoridated. So there's a neurotoxin in the water. We are being medicated when we shouldn't. We didn't give them permission to do that. So although they're saying, so you want to charge us twice for the water, if not 3 times, because their road tax went on paying towards the water company as well, and they want to poison us at the same time. So we're paying to poison ourselves.
Yeah, that's their business as usual. I want to encourage everyone who's listening to go to stopthecrime.net and check out Deborah Tavares' work on primary water, because this whole thing about a water shortage is actually, I'm coming to believe it's a fallacy, and that in Libya, Gaddafi was using primary water to give water to his people, and that's how Israel got so much water. So they're poisoning our water, they're poisoning everything, which actually does bring me to a topic that when you want, I've got one that I'd like to talk about. But with your water thing, can they see over here? We've got a sheriff who supposedly, if the sheriff is elected, he can turn back the federal government, and he is actually the highest political figure with power in the whole county, and can deputize the people, and they can turn around and kick out the federal government. So do you have anything like that over in your part of the world?
No. The police, or the Gardaí as we call them, are just one force controlled. They are, we've no real proper law. They're controlled, they're manipulated by their seniors. We've had a few Gardaí whistleblowers come out and say what's going on, and they've been intimidated and pestered by their own people.
Good.
And it's a very closed shop. I mean, they are like a gang of thugs, a legal gang of thugs.
Exactly like that. The mafia.
Yeah.
The bullies are running the world.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. And we had Mark Stevens on the show, and as Mark said, everything that you do, you're forced to do by the government. Everything is forced. And if it's forced, then as a contract is null and void. You can't, of course, if somebody puts a gun to your head, of course you'll sign anything. Well, this is what they use. They use threats of coercion and extortion to get you to sign the documentation. Then they go, oh yeah, but you volunteered to do that. No, we didn't. You had threats of violence, threats of locking us up if we don't pay that. So what are we going to do? Of course we're going to sign it if you're going to use violence or threats to lock us up. So
what are you going to do about this hated official then? Is there somebody else you can vote him out? Do you wait for the time to vote him out? Is that like another year or so?
Well, what happens in Ireland is probably like America. We have 5 years. These parasites get into government. We have 5 years that we can't do anything. Even if they're really bad at doing their job, we can't get them out. We have to wait for another 5 years. Right?
See, and that's crazy. That's where I think that righteous anger can come in. So you finish up, because it's food for what I'd like to kick around the table as a topic.
Well, we'll talk about that. Over here in Ireland, during the War of Independence in Ireland, in our first constitution, we actually had a process like Switzerland called direct democracy, which means that everything's done by referendum by the people, and you have a thing called recall, which means that if your TD or your politician is not doing their job, you can sack them. Okay?
Good.
Now, our forefathers, during the War of Independence, when they did the Constitution, they actually put that in because they knew politicians could be corrupted. But it was taken out in 1937 because they knew that the people had the power, and the politicians at the time didn't want the people to have the power. They didn't want to have the control. So there are parties over here who are saying, if you get us in, we will reinstate Article 48 of our Constitution, which is direct democracy.
I don't know. I don't like democracy because to me it's gang rule. I would rather have a republic with rules, or anarchy or voluntarism. And anarchy simply means no rulers. It doesn't mean no rules. Anarchy simply means as long as you're not causing harm, injury, or loss, there's no problem. You don't have any ruler telling you what you can and cannot do. I think that's where we get into trouble with a majority vote, because it can be immoral, like so much of the world. I mean, right now, insanity prevails, and everything is immoral, and we're stuck and caught because we're bamboozled into thinking that we need to follow their rules in order to replace the people who supposedly are representing us.
I'd love to get to the stage where we just had common law, harm, loss, or injury,
and common sense.
In common sense, but you see, there's going to be people who won't apply that. So if direct democracy is a step towards common law, then I'm happy to do that.
Whatever you can do to start it moving forward, because I realize it's as much as I'd like us to just break the chain, and we can talk about that too. I know that there are steps that people feel that they have to take beforehand, but as things heat up locally, it'll be interesting to see just exactly what happens and what we the people are capable of once we realize that our moral outrage and righteous indignation is spot on and that we take action.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as somebody said, I was watching a video earlier, and they're getting so blatant. Everybody is seeing it now firsthand, and they're going, actually, them conspiracy theorists were right. They are doing this stuff because it's right in your face. But let me bring Richard in, and we'll get Richard in on the debate. Now, Richard Cranor was on the show a couple of weeks ago. Well, I think was it last week? We thought we'd get Richard back on because I think Richard has a lot more to tell us about his experiences and knowledge and his background. But just for people who aren't aware of Richard's background, he directed a film called Starleaf, currently on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, starring Russell Hodgkinson of the hit sci-fi zombie show Z Nation. And it is receiving rave reviews for its fascinating and original take on the paranormal connections between cannabis, extraterrestrials, PTSD and parallel universes. Good evening, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on board, guys.
Listen, thanks a lot for coming back on. Much appreciated. I did feel that we had kind of a half interview with you, and I felt there was a lot more information there. And so it's great having you back on. I think Karen enjoyed the interview with you as well. So it's great having you back on, so we can just kind of throw everything around on the show tonight and just talk about everything that kind of comes to mind. I just will say this quickly, for sometimes what I do is Alan and Steve's week, so we have no Steve, but something I found out during the week, and this is the typical Irish government for you. My dad received €10 from the government. He's turned 80 years old, so he receives €10 extra in his pension from the government. But they took €9 out of it for tax. I mean,
business as usual.
This is this is what you're dealing with. This is the kind of government you're dealing with. They give them 10 and take back 9. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I'll tell you what, the thing I wanted to put to Karen, to yourself, and to Richard. The topic I have here, and we had the United We Strike Radio Marathon yesterday, by the way, so if any of the listeners want to pop over to the UnitedWeStrike.com website, and all the podcasts are there, myself and Steve did a pre-record, and it's up there as well. And we did talk about this on the pre-record, and it says that airlines considering requiring proof of vaccination for domestic air travel. Now this came from the States, by the way. It says travelling by air may get even more complicated if a reported plan by major carrier airlines requiring passengers to be vaccinated comes to fruition. After the increasing problem of unvaccinated individuals contracting and spreading communicable diseases, airlines hope to be a stopgap solution to preventing large outbreaks. An inside source with the Federal Aviation Authority Administration suggests that multiple major carriers have begun discussing requiring vaccination records for all passengers before allowing them to board a flight. What do you think of that, Karen?
I think it's a bunch of crap. I think it's, again, business as usual, and it's why I come back to the original reason that I started speaking out. We outnumber the SOBs. We greatly outnumber them. And I want to encourage people to check out the United We Strike Marathon, and in particular, to listen to the podcast with Deborah Tavares, because she lays out a lot of what is going on in a very calm manner. And when you really listen to what it is and how we are assaulted on so many sides, and they want us to be immobilized against them. They want slaves, debt slaves, who are only able to do what they're told and then occupy themselves independently with their little machines, so that they can just tune into themselves. You work and then you come home, and if you want to have sex, it's virtual sex, because they don't want you to have families or anything. And so if they can't vaccinate you and, make you into the zombie that they're trying to make you into, they're forcing us to. And I believe very strongly that we do need to stand together, to unite as people in order to protect this life force that is inside of us, that is beyond religion. The very life force itself is being threatened by these vaccines. The transhumanist agenda is full on in progress, and it's going to be extremely difficult to fight back if you allow your body to be poisoned just because someone tells you it's supposed to be. I mean, look at the mercury and the toxins that are in there. Not long ago, there were 15 children who passed out after a vaccination. There's so many things that are going wrong. It was proven also. There are at least, I think it's now 18 dead doctors. It might only be 14. Nonetheless, these are the doctors who did experiments to find out that Nagalase is a toxin that's put into the vaccines that's given to the children, and it kills off the GCMAF, which is an inbuilt organism within our bodies that keeps reproducing and healing ourselves. Vaccines are definitely killing us, and they're killing us more quickly than ever. And that's why at United We Strike, we've got at least a day a month, the 15th, to start thinking about how much can you pull out. Are we going to wait until they crash our economy completely? Or every month, are we going to pull out more and more? So on the 15th, we don't support their schools, we don't support their banks, we pull our money out to use it for ourselves. We reject what they're telling us to do, and we form networks so that 1/15th we can go and we can take action all across the world at the same time locally, because everyone goes home. And we know where the local people are, and we can begin to talk to them now, because I believe it's time to embrace our righteous anger and moral indignation and step into moral stewardship. So when you're talking about vaccinating everyone, in California they want to vaccinate everyone too. And they get us. I just heard my husband tell me, up in Burns, Oregon, I've been really following that, which is just a total amount of bull crap from those evil, lying, inbred, traitorous eugenicists who prefer to be called elite. They are just the worst bullies around, and not only now have they immorally and really unlawfully, illegally, all of it, they make up their own rules, as they go, but they've got the Ammon Bundy, Ryan Bundy in there, now his father's in there. These people left their homes to go protest, which is, again, why I think the most important place to protect is your own home. And they're in jail because of the BLM and because bullies are bamboozling us still with badges, buttons, and bull crap. And we need to move beyond it and stop allowing all this horse crap to happen. And if we could stand and unite one day, at least one day a month, to say no more. If no one flew for one day, can you imagine what would happen? Instead, if they were home networking and saying, okay, if the power goes out, how are we going to survive? Who do we know who can survive without power? Who has a generator? Who has water filters? Who can we barter with over here? We need to start really networking within our communities, because when it comes down, that's where it's going to come down. And we also really need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves about the ramifications of how we get our paycheck. And if our paycheck is evolving from being in a uniform and oppressing other people and doing completely immoral actions, then we need to give ourselves an ultimatum, and those who support us also. If you're married to someone in a uniform and they're going out there and banging heads, it's time to tell them, look, we have a month here. We're going to both sit down and do some research. And if at the end of that time you're still comfortable with your job, then I'm leaving. Or if in that time maybe what we can do is figure out how to talk to other people so that all of us can step out of our uniforms, out of our belief systems, and into our lives. And hopefully, if we did it at the same time, if we did it on the 15th, they can't ignore millions or billions of people who say, no, I won't fight anymore. I'm going to start protecting my home, my family, and thinking with my heart and my brain instead of what's between my legs and following immoral orders.
Well, I think that's probably happening now, in a way, Karen, because apparently they're saying that the ships in the North Atlantic are not really sailing because they've nothing to ship, because people, the consumerism, people are not buying because they don't have the money to buy. So
they're weak now, that's for sure, and they've lost a lot of money. So, every little bit counts that we can do against them. Oh, and what Al had told me is the people who showed up to support the Bundys in 2014, Now 68 arrest warrants have been sent out because what these order-following drones do is take pictures when they mill in the crowd, and then they come back to get you individually. So now what they're doing also up in Burns, Oregon, the people who showed up there, these traitorous CIA, FBI, alphabet gang bozos are individually coming and intimidating them, sometimes knocking them around. So it's the bullies against us, and bullies need to be stood up to and eliminated. And once you do stand up, and you stand up en masse, they turn into the biggest chicken shits around. And it's time that we stopped accepting what they're doing to us. We all have to be in the ADL, the Anti-Defecation League, and stop them from crapping all over us.
I think we'll have to do something. Just going, passing that off to Richard. Richard, the vaccinations, the FAA getting involved. What do you think of that?
Okay, so this is a kind of a controversial topic. I'm around a lot of mothers and things like that, and so the way I feel about it, and where I stand, is that the idea of a vaccination, to me, isn't a bad one. The idea of trying to inoculate yourself against, some sort of disease, and having science out there looking out for these things and trying to do something about it. But the problem with it, and the reason why I'm anti-vaccine myself, is because as of right now, we as a people, we don't have any access to the ingredients. We're not in control of what goes in there, and so that stuff is being forced upon us. And like Karen's saying, like a lot of people are starting to realize, it comes with a lot of negative effects. So it's sort of like, I think it's a bad idea right now because you don't have any say in what these corporations and these banks are doing with the vaccines. And these vaccines, again, it goes into my other big thing, which is, we live in a profit-driven society, first and foremost. And when you have a profit-driven society, especially in the fields of medicine, they're not putting your health first. So I think it's a valid point when people don't want vaccines, because as of right now, the way that's all run is it's sort of mafia run. It's run by these corporations and these banks and these, insurance companies, and their primary goal really isn't your health. It's to fill you full of this stuff, which, I don't trust. So I think I'm sympathetic. I understand. I'm not against the idea of a vaccine, but we don't live in a world right now where the people who are going to be vaccinated have any real, ability, to find out what's going in them and stop and choose, which is against your personal rights. You
Exactly.
Need to know what that is,
Well, if you have, vaccines in themselves, if they worked and they weren't full of poisons and heavy metals and the likes of formaldehyde, fair enough. If they actually worked and they didn't contain them, then I don't think people would have a problem with it. But the problem is they don't work in a majority of cases. I mean, we interviewed Dr. Rima and along with other doctors, and they've said the same thing. So personally, I wouldn't kind of touch them myself. What's your take on it, Karen?
Well, also you have to consider that it's all a bunch of lies, because when people started getting healthier, it wasn't due to vaccines. It was due to better sanitation practices. People didn't used to wash their hands before surgery and all of that stuff. Also, you think about the vaccines that they're trying to give you are for diseases that they create. We live in an age where our governments can openly talk about weaponizing diseases. I mean, what the frack is that? And we pay for it. So then they want to stick them into us. And actually, Richard, you can find out what's in them. There are a lot of exposés out there and a lot of package inserts that people are not reading. Then again, we would not have a lot of the diseases that they're trying to vaccinate us from, just like this new one, the Zika. And all of this crap, they make it all up. This is such an old plan. And Richard, you brought up something that I've been saying for a long time, where it's similar. How can we, as individuals, actually expect any kind of life when profit is valued above the very people who create the little shiny pieces of silver and gold and, the colored fiat currency? We're so disconnected from our own worth that we really need a huge wake-up call. And if the resonance of the universe is increasing, which seems to be true, what my hope is that just like in science, you'll see a bacteria or a virus, and if you've got 100% of the colony, 80% can be swayed by the 10% on either side. And that always confused me until earlier this year when I had a huge aha moment. And that is, it's the intensity of the frequency of the 10% that can sway the other. And so when I'm talking about moral outrage and righteous anger, anger is not a negative emotion. That's what we've been taught. And we're also taught, turn the other cheek. If he slaps you, turn the other cheek, render unto Caesar, and live your whole life on your knees, bowing and praying in pain, so that when you die, you get to go to heaven. But it's a lie, and it's the biggest lie. We really don't know what goes on after we die. However, I choose to believe. I'm spirit, and I feel very strongly that something will. But right here and right now, in this third dimension that has been turned into a third dimension by the evil line inbred traitors, eugenicists, or elite as they prefer it, we need to rise to the occasion of cleaning that up. And so what I've noticed too is my emails now, when I put anger and moral outrage in there, boy, are they sent back to me. And there are warnings out there from other people who are on my email list. They'll get something that'll say, oh, Yahoo is watching this. They don't want us to embrace our moral outrage and righteous anger, because then we'll step into honorable defense. So my goal this year, and as much as possible now from now on, is to bring up this topic and ask us, what do you think would happen if 10% of us were educated, we were standing in moral outrage and righteous indignation? Because if you're not righteously pissed off at the war that they've declared on us and everything that they're doing, poisoning the air, the water, the food, the land, and our children, if you're not righteously pissed off, you're not paying attention. And if 10% of us can hold that and hone it and prepare to take right action, then we've got a chance. And that's why I think if we burn with that fire, and we've got a date every month, that it won't necessarily be on that date that it hits the fan, but if we can practice monthly and fuel our fire and network, then possibly our 10% can use anger as the motivating force to spur us to action, to sway that other 80%. What do you think, Richard?
No, I totally agree. I've been telling people for a while now, what's happening is it's a return to the feudal system. But this one's going to be electronic in nature, and it's also going to be enforced by limiting the frequency bandwidth, which I agree. I think we're primarily consciousness manifesting in physical form. But really, even physical form is just an agreed upon calibration of energy that creates our five senses. So, by the foods we eat, the toxins in our environment, I do believe there's a slow whittling away of our ability to keep connected to our true spiritual heritage. So all of the stuff that's going on is like a slow but steady prison that's being sort of, hoisted upon us from all these multiple different angles. And eventually it's just to keep us like we were 500 years ago, as serfs, pretty much just working the land and serving our masters. So I feel like that's sort of what is happening. It was 200 years ago. These guys got together. They formed this constitution thing, and all of a sudden, we were free for a little bit. But that's always been, to the elite, that's always been a sore spot for them. And I think they've been trying to find a way for a long time to get back to where they have the leverage. And so they're using this evolving technology-based system to kind of get back to what they've always known. So I've been telling people lately, we got to do what you're saying. We got to just slowly disengage, and anything that gives them leverage over us, find a way to pull out from it through our energy, whether that's solar panel, alternative forms of energy at the local level, through food, making sure your food's healthy and not buying into the Tyson chicken, the big food sort of big ag mindsets. Try to heal yourself as much as you can naturally, and over time, if you take away those things that they have the most leverage over your life with, which is your food, your health, and the energy that seems to drives everything, in time, money, in time, that takes away the power that they have, which is us being in compliance with those systems. So that's what it's going to take. Decentralization, like they say in anarchist circles, is really the only way to get away from this centralized, because it's the centralization that gives them the power. The fact that there's a Federal Reserve. I mean, if we somehow got together and got rid of that alone, would immediately start reducing the amount of leverage that, this New World Order has over everybody. So I like what you're saying, and I agree that the step towards freedom is to just slowly take away and take back the power that we have, that we can do. You can start farms right now, and you can network with people, and you can slowly start weaning yourself off of this grid.
Well, what about, though, standing as one? Because what I've noticed, and I started really pounding the pavement in 2009 and hit it for a lot of years, and I'd like you to check out UnitedWeStrike.com, because it seems to me that still the biggest thing that we are missing is the unity. And if there were a day a month, I mean, think about what a day a month could be like if it truly were united. If a lot of the people who are wearing uniforms knew that millions of other people were going to step out of the system on one day, maybe they would be brave enough to step out of their uniforms individually, because they need our help and support. They truly need it the most. I cannot understand why parents are silent when their children have been lied into these wars of conquest, and why they're silent when their children are blown up and bits and pieces of them are blown off so that these cretins can practice their robot transhumanism on them. Why they don't see that, why we don't see that our lives matter, not just black lives, and not immigration that comes in and is so totally against sanctuary. These Muslims who are in other countries, they are, they're victims as well. They're displaced and they're angry, but they have no right to come into a country that is offering sanctuary and start harming and injuring and causing loss to the people there. And just because it's their so-called religion, well, I'm sorry, wake the frack up. You wouldn't even be here without your mother. Back off, and if you're not going to do that, we're kicking you out. But we're bamboozled by the badges and the titles and the buttons. But again, if we stood and if we had a day every month where people could think, you know what, I have X amount of days to plan. Now, the 15th is tomorrow. I'm not expecting any huge things. But I'm asking again, and this time I'm not attached to it. I can't be. I was way too attached to the outcome when I first started talking about United We Strike and kind of co-founded that. But now I realize that all I can do is what I can do is try and let this message through. And my real mantra is, I will to will thy will, which means that I want to honor the life force that's coming through me. And when I'm quiet and I go into my meditation, what it tells me is it wants to be protected, and that it's time for honorable defense, and that each and every one of us needs to look within at the same time and do that. Give it 15 minutes on the 15th to ask, what does life expect of me? To kneel and pray and pay and obey, or to rise and stand on my feet and anchor myself in my bare feet to the earth and stand there and be grateful for the connection and allow right action to flow through me, and to begin to take steps to prepare so that once a month at least we cut the chain more and more and more, and to look at where we can take our money back. And if you are paying credit card companies who have paid billions of dollars in fines and fees, you're an accomplice. I decided not to be an accomplice, and I'm refusing to be an accomplice. And, that frees me up to do what I will with payments that were totally in a contract that was false to begin with, because I never knew I was taking a loan from the mafia. And once I found out, my better sense of morality is refusing to allow me to finish paying them. They need to prove that I even owe them anything. And this is where, Alan, thank you for the information, and we can talk about how it ultimately works out. But think about if all of us stopped paying our credit cards on the 15th. Think about what would happen if none of us flew for a week. And you can talk through Skype. Think about what would happen if we all networked enough so if the power did go down, we knew who was going to take turns keeping it on, who was going to keep the water going, who was going to babysit in school for us, who was going to farm. Those are the things we need to do.
Well, let's talk about that actually, because funny you should say that. I was watching a video today. There is a lady on YouTube called Lisa Haven. I'm sure some people probably have seen her videos. And Lisa's seems to be quite good. Now, the video I was watching, and it's a recent video that she did, she was talking about them planning an EMP or a pretend CME, which is an EMP is an electromagnetic pulse, or a CME is a coronal mass ejection, and either of them can wipe out the electronics. Now, it could be a global thing, or it could be just in the States. But the National Geographic did a documentary. It's on YouTube called American Blackout, and they showed you a what-if scenario over a 10-day period if the power went out. And it started off with the neighbours getting together and having a barbecue. They were cooking their frozen food because it had to be used. And then 3 days later, they're killing each other for a tin of beans. And I do think that, and plus, you know, they use Hollywood as well to tell us what's going on. Now, I did manage to watch a movie called The Fifth Wave. It's a new movie just been released in January. And I did manage to see it. And I wasn't overly impressed by it. But the whole concept behind it was that they had these 5 waves, these 5 things that they're planning to do, and to reduce the population of the planet and control things. Now, whether that's the powers that be or whether that's a higher alien race, I don't know. But it was interesting to have a look at it anyway, because, as I say, they use Hollywood to tell us. Richard, what's your take on, you know, do you think from a EMP, CME or financial point of view, I mean, we are coming very close to the edge of the cliff now with everything that's going on?
Yeah, I totally believe that, and it's going to be important now to start thinking about alternative systems to exist upon outside of the grid. That's kind of why I go back to that decentralization model. We got to find a way. There are people, like even in Seattle, who are forming alternative mesh networks and things like that, and so I think it's just going to be important that we find a way to use technology, but in a decentralized way, to network amongst communities and get around this centralized government and economic structure, which is really just a big mechanism at this point for exploitation. And even if it was totally benign, say it was all totally benign, and you had a CME or a solar flare or an EMP attack, it's all gone, in an instant. So you got to have an intelligent race would have a decentralized, redundant system of as a backup. But we're not right now a very intelligent race, and so we are open to this kind of manipulation. And I think they intend it to be that way. But I think it's a real danger. I mean, was it 1908? There was a solar flare that wiped out San Francisco, or wiped out all the telephone lines or telegraph lines in the United States. I mean,
the big one was in 1859, which is called the Carrington effect.
Right. Yeah. So that was back then. I mean, imagine that happening now. I mean, it's a pretty horrendous thing that is a real liability, and there's not, and whether it's intentional or not, I don't know, but it's something that, I don't think we should all go back to the Stone Age, but I do think we could use technology and localize it more and get off this centralized way of seeing the world, because that just not only is it exploitative when it works, but it's also damning when it won't work. It's also catastrophic. So we lose either way, and we're not a smart race of people anymore. We're not doing things with common sense. Common sense is, why truck your food from China or 1,000 miles away when you could grow it locally? Because whether it's a terrorist attack or a CME, you're just not in as much danger. Your food is nearby. Simple concepts like that, because we're so centralized now, we don't even pay attention to.
Yeah, that's the way it is in Ireland. I don't think the farmers are actually, being an agricultural country, Ireland, we don't actually grow. We actually ship a lot in from outside. Right. And we talked about self-sufficiency an awful lot on the show. And the more self-sufficient you are, the better it's going to be for you, because if something like this does happen, whether it's an EMP or a CME, if they plan it or else it's just nature, then you really are going to be, people are really going to be stuffed. Now, the start of this, I mean, it's you've probably seen the X-Files. I'm sure, Karen and Richard, you've probably seen maybe Series 10, Episode 1, which they actually blatantly come out and say everything of what's going on. It's unbelievable. They're actually telling people.
I couldn't believe that. I got to say, I got to agree with you there. I was blown away. I was like, holy jeez. And now I'm a little worried that, because you're right about how Hollywood becomes a mouthpiece for certain agendas. I'm actually really worried, well, not worried, but, or maybe, that there's two things that are lining up right now. We're going to get a disclosure at some point here in the near future. And maybe either the writers are warning us in X-Files, or it's just they're part of the agenda. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I was really like you said, I was really blown away that they flatly just came out and said what I think is really happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're going to do soft disclosure. I think the X-Files was part of the soft disclosure. I don't think you're going to see Obama, anytime soon standing at the White House saying, by the way, we're not alone and there are ETs and we've been in communication with them. I can't see him doing that. I think it's going to be a soft disclosure because I just don't see them doing that. But I don't know. What do you think, Karen?
Sorry, I was in the chat room here. I'm trying to type and think. Disclosure, it's a touchy subject because I think a great deal of what we're hearing is really from the militant industrial complex, including a recent revelation that one of the guys who was a big channeler for the so-called Galactic Federation came out and apologized for being used in what he claimed was a mind control experiment where he actually was subjected to voice-to-skull technology, which does exist, and they were beaming into his head these ideas and telepathically telling him what they wanted him to know, to say, and to be revealed. And again, all these messages are about, don't do anything, brothers and sisters. Forgive all your oppressors. Keep praying and know that the money is on its way,
Yeah.
And it's all stuff that, while it would be nice to believe in, we're here and now. And most of this stuff does come from the militant industrial complex. They are refusing to allow us to have this technology. And this goes back so far. Richard, you said it went back like 200 years or so, but I'd actually like to put this thought in your head, too. If we had actually won the Revolutionary War, then why would we be in debt to King George?
Right.
So we never won. Yeah, and then it was like a year after we supposedly won that he sent over 100 legal advisors who took us out of common sense and common law and brought us into the statutes that we're still bamboozled by today.
Yeah, they really don't want to give up their power. They find all kinds of legal loop-arounds and technological loop-arounds to try to, they allow us to, what do they call that when you have free-range chicken to kind of go out there and graze a little bit more?
Yeah. Okay.
Than we used to, but it's there's still a fence up, and no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think the military-industrial complex is one of the most dangerous aspects to modern life on here on Earth, and now there's a prison-industrial complex. There's all kinds of these complexes, and I love how Eisenhower, warned everybody about this, and he was a Republican, as well. He wasn't like, by today's standards, people think of Republicans as being totally part of that, but back then, he was just trying to give everyone a heads up that these guys are coming and they're serious, and he was absolutely right on.
Well, can I ask you're in the States, okay? Now,
yeah.
I couldn't tell you the difference between whether somebody wants to be a Democrat or they want to be Republican. All I see is two groups being controlled by puppeteers at the top.
Yeah.
And when people say, oh, well, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, does it really matter? You're both controlled anyway.
Right. I mean, that's the danger right now, is that we live in a society now where it's so hard to get people to unite like you guys want them to, like Karen wants them to, because, they find the little pain points in each person's ideology, and the Democrats tend to try to bring out the social awareness issues that people have that are more liberal. And of course, Republicans try to appeal to more of the, I don't know what it is, the national and the economic incentives that the rich have. But ultimately, nobody bothers to ask themselves, where do we actually all agree on? And I think everybody would agree, no matter what political party they're part of, that things like the Federal Reserve are unconstitutional. Having local energy supplies and food supplies and local independent networks are far superior to living in a centralized government right now that is vulnerable to not just terrorism and EMP, but to corruption. So all of those things, Democrats, supposedly Republicans, all would agree on. But because of the way you can manipulate people emotionally with propaganda on both sides, you keep creating this division in our society. And you get people chasing other tangents. You get people chasing other ideologies instead of focusing on what you could actually accomplish together. That's really the most destructive thing. And it's actually why I became, libertarian, because I can pretty much say whatever I want, believe whatever I want. But ultimately, that's what keeps anything from really happening in the United States, is that everybody picks a team instead of thinking about, well, what do we all share right now? What do we all agree on right now?
Well, it's the same over here in Ireland. We have different parties. We have the mainstream parties, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin and Labour. And then we have smaller parties outside that. And people support these parties like they support the football team.
Exactly,
But the trouble is, they don't realise that these parties are destroying the bloody country. It's, it's like my grandfather supported them and my father did, so I'm going to support them. And you want to get these people and shake them and go, do you not see that these parties, I know the TD that you like is great at fixing potholes on the road, but his party is destroying the country. Do you not see that? But as you say, common sense, if you have common sense, it's having common sense is a course, because you have to deal with everybody else who doesn't have it.
Well, and and again, go ahead.
You finish your thoughts, okay.
Go.
It goes back to the emotional angle that, like you're saying, like it's about teams and team spirit, things that have nothing to do. What everybody wants is freedom, really. At the end of the day, I don't care about the teams involved, but that's how they manipulate. Is they create this division. And who was really good at it was Hitler. Hitler, when he was when he was moving the Nazi party forward, he was trying to find angles to take over Germany. Him and his propaganda guys, they analyzed how do you motivate large groups of people, and it's not through intelligence, it's not through deductive reasoning, it's through emotions. And so he found a way to cater to the most base emotions he can. So all of the Nazi propaganda has nothing to do, if you study it, has nothing to do with intelligence, has nothing to do with common sense. It's what is the base motivator, and it's usually fear. And it's usually other high power emotions. So that's kind of what these parties do still to this day. They use the emotions of people and exploit those things. And that's how power is maintained, because a lot of people can't escape those deep emotional fears and motivations. They can't think while feeling those things. And that's how you keep a population constantly at war with each other and themselves.
Well, one thing that I totally agree with you, although in my opinion, they divide us on so many different places that really don't matter. I think we need to shake out priorities. And so now, Max, I want to talk to you, because I see that you're really into proving that the Earth is flat. And this has become a huge religion for people. It does not really resonate with me, because the more that you look at yourself and any solid objects, they become round. You got atoms and, the nucleus and protons, and there's movement and it's energy, but it's round. It's not flat. So, and also, when we see an eclipse, it's not a horizontal eclipse. If there was a sun shining from the other side of a flat surface, it would be horizontal. It's vertical. But at the same time, that's not nearly as important to me as making sure that none of our children have to suffer from vaccines, making sure that we're not having genetically altered food served on our plates without having any recourse, stopping them from chemtrailing in our sky, because the bottom line is so many people now are so tied up in whether it's a round or flat Earth that they're missing the bigger picture of we're still getting screwed, and we're closer. We're all on this train. And I don't care if it's flat or round, we're still screwed. And unless we stop this train and jump off so that only the bozos can go over the cliff, we're all going over. We need to put the brakes on. It doesn't matter the shape of the Earth. Those are, in my opinion, those are minute details. And if the biggest reason to focus on that is because we've been lied to, well, hello, we've been lied to about everything, including... our origins. So, why pick a flat Earth to divide ourselves when instead, if you have children, you can be working in your area to prevent them from being vaccinated. You could be looking at what your sheriff is doing. You can be networking to stop the genetically altered foods. So, maybe you think, Max, that it's an equally important piece of the puzzle. You're welcome to that, but in the greater scheme of things, what does that have to do with locally? Are you going to go to your friends and say, hey, we're getting screwed on the Earth is flat. But then beyond that, where's the action? There's nothing. It's just a complete shattering of the fact that, you believe in a round ball and I believe we're flat. And we're fighting again. Instead of how about believing that we should be breathing fresh air, we should be having clean water, we should be having healthy food and sustainable communities. We should be free. That is, in my opinion, a much, much bigger picture than whether the earth is flat or round. It's just another way to divide us when we could stand together on the 15th and say, screw you back, whether I'm standing on a flat or round ball. I'm not paying attention or giving you any of my energy whatsoever.
I'm just touching base on the whole sheriff thing. Vin on People's Internet Radio did say that actually our sheriff can deputise people if they wanted to, but they don't over here. So we do have a sheriff, not in the way that it'd be a sheriff in America or in the States, but we do have a sheriff over here, which is basically from the British law system, where the sheriff will come out and take you out of the house, evict you, and change the locks and all that kind of stuff. So we have that kind of sheriff.
And that's the kind that if we could support that, see, we need to move beyond badges and buttons and paperwork and laws and legislation, because there's always somebody in the background who's writing it down or rewriting in order to make sure that they don't have to pay for anything, and we do. And, you know, our worth is not found outside of ourselves. It's found inside of ourselves. And when enough of us decide locally that we want somebody to represent us, to work with us on moral principles, we can throw out all of the laws and have a huge bonfire. Of course, we can save some for the history books to show how lame we were for many years, how mistreated we were and lied to. Our entire history is a lie. But we do need to grow up and begin to fix ourselves locally and stop worrying about the parade of politicians who are trying to say, oh yeah, look at me, at the same time ignore the extreme methane gas leak in Los Angeles, the ongoing radiation of Fukushima, the war games in the Pacific and all oceans, and the fact that our planet is being killed, and life itself is being killed. We need to protect life, and I want to try and inspire at least 10% of us to righteously hold on to and claim our anger so we can turn it into right action and moral stewardship, which is the bottom line. Because for our lives to matter, we have to stand for what we believe in. And to rise and stand together is what I am hoping we will do, you know, because how many of us will die today so psychopaths can have their way instead of simply understand they are the hammer, we are the hand. And once we refuse to pick up that hammer and hit our brothers and sisters with it, they lose.
That's it. We have to kind of down tools. I will say one thing. Richard can come in a minute. But I will say one thing about when our grandchildren look back, if the earth is still here and we have grandchildren, they will look back at this time in history and they'll go, how did you not see these things going on? This is to the people who are still, you know, asleep. Right, you know, right. Our grandchildren will go, how did you not see this stuff going on? How did it not occur to you that what they were doing was wrong and you just accepted this stuff? I mean, I think that's where our grandchildren will do. They look back and they look back at this time in particular and go, how did you not see what they were doing? You know, so Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a very pivotal point in human history. I think there is this latent potential in our deep unconscious mind, in our deep being, that is trying to evolve right now. But it's up against all of the sort of darkest aspects of our own nature, and I do believe extraterrestrial, or what they would call, I guess, demons or other intelligences in the universe that don't want to see humanity succeed on some level. I mean, I've had a lot of paranormal experiences in my life. I've come to believe that what we call consciousness is not 100% biological bound, and for whatever reason, you know, we're just at this tipping point. So it is important that if we really want to be free, we got to find a way to disengage and take like Karen's saying, the hammer out of the hand, slowly but surely, you know, to wean ourselves and get off of this hamster wheel. Because I feel like though that the thing that has to be also added to the equation, I do think the power of our being, it's being put to the test, but it is growing slowly. It's whether everybody's going to wake up in time, you know, I don't know. But you know, the earth is an amazing place. I mean, it's an abundant place. It gives life for free. It doesn't charge anybody to give life. And so we've hoisted this criminal mental condition over the planet, and now a physical one, where, you know, we try to extract everything at a price, and like water rights and things like that. And all of that is just part of a control mechanism over us and our our being. So I feel like the day is coming slowly but surely where this is all coming to a head, and human beings are just going to have to, decide for themselves now. Like we're going to let our being, evolve along with Earth, and these structures that are in the way right now that are not healthy have to start going. And I'm a big, the next sequel for Starleaf is going to deal with sort of the GMO agenda, which I'm a big anti-GMO guy. And when I get into debates about it with people, I try to tell them it's not about the science. It's about the fact that you can't see greed under a microscope. We live in a world now where everything's all, you got these scientists and these experts who come out and they try to tell you that these chemicals are doing this and it's all fine. But nobody is factoring in just the evil that comes when you can leverage, a whole society's food supply and create artificial supply and demand when the Earth itself doesn't do that. The Earth itself is a freely giving and abundant place. But of course, if you're polluting it and then you're controlling, the output of it, then you can control large groups of people. But I always tell people, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye the Science Guy, they both came out and now they're acting, I think, as stooges for, this big criminal conspiracy to basically enforce GMOs onto the world. And they came at it from a science point of view, saying, well, the science is safe. And again, it's not about the science. It's about the fact that throughout human history, food has always been grown freely without any kind of proprietary end game coming from any kind of centralized government until now. Now we have people who pay farmers, to not grow food so they can become part of this subsidized corn machine that we use in the United States. And it has nothing to do with whether or not there's arable land or there's enough food to grow. It's just part of the mafia to control food supply. And that's not helping us.
Well, as they say, we have to stop counting calories and start counting chemicals in our food. I think that's very important. And I was just going to say, Richard, with the subject matter that you're dealing with your Starleaf film that you did, have people actually looked at you as if you had 10 heads because you're talking about subject matters that really goes over their head? Because we find that, generally, some people who, when you challenge their belief system, instead of them kind of saying, well, I kind of don't agree with that, but I don't know enough about it, so I can't really comment. But this, at this moment in time, I don't know enough about it. But I find that there's some people, not a lot of people, thank goodness, but there's some people that when you challenge their belief system or you talk about a subject that you don't get, they feel they have to attack you. For some reason, it's in their psyche that, and it's like, why are you attacking me when I'm just talking about a subject that doesn't fit into your belief system? Are you not able to say something constructively rather than actually go and attack somebody?
Well, that's because no one wants to admit this, but even the most learned of men and women, no matter how many PhDs they have, no matter how much science they know, are still emotional creatures. And when you attack somebody's belief system, and science is a belief system as well, you wind up evoking sometimes those responses. But my whole thing with people is I'm just trying to find the common ground that exists between all of us. And when I get into conversations about other intelligences being active in the universe and the fact that I don't believe carbon matter is the only way in which a life form or an intelligence can exist, I go back to kind of an age-old problem with our understanding scientifically of what we call consciousness in the universe. And there's a term out there, if you ever want to look it up, it's called the hard problem of consciousness. And it's sort of the big gaping hole in the modern scientific understanding of how we think and how we do it. Like the simplest way to describe it in a nutshell is we can measure neurons in the brain. We can see that there's a correlation sometimes in the brain between certain, stimulus and the way the brain responds to it. But one thing that really stumps everyone, and this is something, again, this is a very simple analogy, but if you play a piano right now and you play a minor chord or you play a major chord, you can measure the sound waves hitting the eardrum and the neurons that are firing off. But what you can't measure is why a minor chord feels kind of sad and why a major chord feels kind of happy. And that's just a small tidbit, but it exponentially grows from there, that everything that we experience in life, we don't have any way right now neurologically of understanding why it's being experienced that way. And so that just, to me, and if you go further down the line, you guys were talking about Edgar Mitchell earlier. Edgar Mitchell founded a thing called the IONS Institute, led by Dean Radin in California. And they've done a lot of studies on this subject matter. And the more studies that they do scientifically, the more and more it's becoming obvious that what we call being, what we call consciousness, it just doesn't seem to be emanating from space-time. It seems to be part of another aspect of the universe that interfaces with space-time. But so anyway, these types of conversations I'm having right now, I mean, they scientifically are pointing to the reality that in consciousness is not something that's purely bound by biology. And because of that, I do think that we have to look at the universe now as a very intelligent place with both, I think, a tendency towards the good and sometimes a tendency towards the malevolent, and depending on where you're at in the evolutionary process at a particular point in time, like here on Earth, I think we're at a point where cathartically we're reaching this apex point where all of this almost animal instincts of hurting people and, controlling people are coming up against the impulse for true freedom, emerging from each human being. And that's where we're at.
Excellent. What I'm hoping is that just like with this energy that's coming through us, this is my one and only true hope, is that it is affecting us in that it is positively affecting our consciousness. And that just like when we are growing into adulthood, we don't have any control whatsoever over the hormones and the changes that automatically take place and move us from being an adolescent into, teenagers and then being an adult. And hopefully at this point in time, maybe we've been in a loop for millions of years on this planet, and we come to a point where we reach the same state where we're either going to destroy or save ourselves. And we've, in the past, continued to destroy ourselves because some of the artifacts that are found are, millions of years old. There are 65 million-year-old pyramids in the Crimea. And a lot of the fighting that's taking place is in, the older countries that have such wonderful history and artifacts that, again, are being kept from us. But maybe through tuning in and through taking time to step aside and to close our eyes and to ask of this life force what it wants from us, maybe what it wants is for us to get this upgrade where moral stewardship will start coming through loud and clearly, and we will automatically begin to wake up. And I work always as well on healing the water we carry. Water is in everything. Water is even in fire, and water has memory. If we can heal our water and concentrate on that and have all the water heal, then that would also change us, because water can remember where we're from, who we are, and water is life itself. If we can protect that water, and energetically I work towards doing that, and I work towards taking action physically and speaking out, so that hopefully as this frequency raises, we will hit an aha moment where all of a sudden that, they like to say the 100th monkey, but they're calling us animals always. So I think that great aha moment where we realize all of a sudden, that's why we're here, to take care of our lives, ourselves, to think with our hearts and our heads, and to step into moral stewardship, because, again, for our lives to matter, we've got to stand for something.
Well, I think, I know today is Valentine's Day and everything else, and I don't want to be a bit cheesy, but we have said it on the show before, love is the highest emotion. I mean, there's only two, love and fear. And love is the highest emotion. And I think that's where we have to go. I mean, again, we have to move away from ego and ignorance. I mean, I see it on a daily basis, the ego and ignorance of people in general, okay? So when you're kind of aware of kind of what's going on, and then you see the people being ignorant, and they're not really. And ignorance, and I know somebody said to me the other day, well, that word, it's very, it's very abrasive, the word ignorance. But if you look up the dictionary definition of it, it's just a lack of knowledge, a lack of information. So maybe ignorance is probably abrasive. Maybe you want to use a more subtle word. But we do have to move away from ego and ignorance and move towards humility and wisdom. That's our journey for all of us. And we have to go towards love. So maybe that word might be a bit harsh, but, we do see it. And it is frustrating when you're trying to educate people to certain things when you're talking to them. And I'm not talking about trying to push agenda or trying to push information on them, but you ask questions about certain things. maybe chemtrails, because you can see them in the sky, and you go, well, that plane there, that has a contrail, and that plane there has a chemtrail. Do you see the difference? Do you want to know why? Oh, well, I'm not really interested.
And those are so much more important than whether the Earth is flat or round, and it's amazing to me how people are clinging to the flat Earth theory like that's the biggest lie of all, and it proves that there's God. And again, it's maybe, maybe. It doesn't really resonate with me. However, after we're free, I can sit down and spend all kinds of time, trying to figure out why you believe what you believe, and that could be interesting. But right now, it's a lot more interesting to me that we stop these wars of central banking, because, again, if it's flat or round, we're still blowing up the Earth. We're allowing them to blow up the Earth and use chemicals that are outlawed. I mean, everything is so immoral. It's why I hope, again, that 10% of consciousness, boy, and to make that vibrate so strongly with righteous indignation that we come together on what we truly need. Clean air, clean water, healthy food, and self-sufficient communities and love. Because the righteous anger that I'm speaking about stems from loving the life force itself so much that you recognize it demands protecting and honoring. And then when we really can let it flow, if all of us could embrace I will to will thy will, which is not our egos, but that's the will of the life force. What is it telling you? Is it telling you that it's better to follow a religion that gives you no life whatsoever, or to stand and see what you can actually create right here and right now?
Yep. Yeah, I always get into this situation with people where I go, let's just concentrate on what we can all agree on, before we get caught up in like these specifics that can like sidetrack your growing sense of understanding. So like, when it comes to like global warming, I don't get into big debates about it with people. I just say, what's the simplest common denominator that we all agree on, which is, why would you want to pollute your Earth to begin with? Why allow companies to do it and corporations to do it, and whether they're going to use it as leverage later or not, whether it's a natural phenomenon or not, it still doesn't help to pollute the Earth. It does nobody any good to do that. When it comes to chemtrails, I always tell people, whether you believe them or not, there is a precedent in human history for the U.S. government actually doing it. What do you think about that? So it's kind of like, I think people get too intellectual sometimes, and what you have to really do is just look at what's the most common sense thing immediately that we can all agree on, that we can all move forward on together, and stop debating things that you could debate about forever. Like focus on what's really happening right now and do something about that.
And how about self-ownership?
Well, today in Ireland, I think one of the things that we're going to focus on, and we try and focus on, is the fact that the banks are fundamentally corrupt, and there's massive evictions going on, like in the States, foreclosures, and the fact that there's massive suicides because of the banking system and the banks threatening people, and we have massive homelessness. They're the day-to-day things that we need to deal with. And they're the day-to-day things that we can all get involved in and try and help out and try and expose.
Exactly right. Because we do need to take action. We're so close to the edge of that cliff that we can't wait either, in my opinion, for the universe to raise our vibrations. We need action. We need to look at the things like the thing going up in Burns, Oregon. We need to look at these thugs, these mafia criminals who are wearing uniforms and making us submit to their will because they hold up a piece of paper and then they surround you with guns and they force you through violence to comply. Right. And that is so against life itself. Life is not about pain. We're the only species that has to pay for our existence. And the only reason poverty exists is because we've got people who have usurped the resources and have stolen it from us. It would not exist otherwise. And we're just too caught up again in obeying somebody who's supposed to be an expert. We're trained in their indoctrination centers called schools to obey the experts and not to trust your own better judgment. And it is time to trust our judgment. But plug in that divine umbilical cord and to ask of yourself, what is expected of me? What is life expected of me? What does this life force inside of me want? And for me, it's to speak out and to use my voice and to protect it and to try and maybe have a better way of putting my point across in a set of lyrics, maybe with a little melody, something that will that'll be easier for people maybe to listen to, because I have come to realize that in a lot of the past when I was speaking out, I was really angry, but I didn't have a greater understanding of why I was angry. And now that I really do know I'm angry, righteously so, at all of this war declared upon us and trying to murder us, and the United States government predicting that in 2025 there will be 69 million of us here. Only 69 million. There are over 316 million now. So we've got to get busy. What do they know that we don't? And why do we want to wait and let them crash the stock market, which they're doing, and force us into their cashless society when we can pull our money and resources out so we have them now? That's important.
Have you guys ever heard of I think it's called the Vogel experiment? It was a town in Austria back in World War II that the mayor formed his own alternative currency. He basically made a denomination that depreciated by 1% a week. And so if you wanted to keep it at its face value, you had to go buy a stamp. But what it did is it forced people to spend money. It kept people from hoarding. And he got so popular, his town got so successful from that all these other Austrian mayors convened in his town and tried to figure out, like, how do we bring this to our country or our community? And of course, as soon as the word got out that he was successful and they were creating surpluses and yada, 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 the Central Bank of Austria came in there and shut it all down. So, I mean, it's a perfect example of what happens when people, do their own thing in their own community and start to create like alternative currencies, which I think are really, really important now. If there's ever a time to start creating alternative currencies, it's now.
But
because
I think the problem is, Richard, is that, see, if you're dealing with a currency, you're opening yourself up to be attacked or to be shut down or to be jailed. Where we have talked about time and time again on the show about time banking, because it's your currency is your energy, your labor.
There you go.
Right? It's not a physical item that, the central bank can come in. They can't do that because it's your energy. They can't shut down your energy. So we've talked about it. And then if the currency, if it does go cashless or the system crashes and the banks close, well then you still have your energy. And we've talked about time banking on the show, and a great example which was given, because some people say, well, I don't have any skills, what can I do? Well, one of the examples that was given was that there was a paraplegic who put a name down for time banking. And people are saying, hang on, what can a paraplegic do in time banking? But apparently this person was fluent in French, so she get French lessons. And then that's what she traded her credits for, to get other bits and pieces of work done around her house. So everybody has a skill, whether it's cutting the grass, going shopping, child minding, whatever it is, everybody has a skill. And if the system collapses, time banking is going to be, I think that's going to be very important for everybody to at least understand it, that it can be done and not to feel lost. Now, for the selfish people who can't be bothered or who are lazy, they will soon see when they realise that, okay, I need to get things done, and I can't get things done unless I do something. So I'm going to have to get up off my arse and do something, because if I don't do that, I won't get anything back. And that's a great thing.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, because we already do the work. And if we can come to the conclusion that all we have to do is do the work actually that speaks to our hearts, that we love, and if the other work that needs to be done, that's more of the dirty work, we rotate the jobs. So instead of having politicians or politics, many bloodsuckers, what we need is just to realize, okay, I'll work a day over here helping farm, and then I'll go over here and help pound nails, and then maybe I'll do this. Maybe I only have to work 3 days a week at some job that I like, and rotate the tough stuff. Okay, one day a month I'll take out the trash, and somebody else will do that the other day. And we can work together and network, because it's our time that is really what's valuable, because we can co-create things that are all around us. We already have done the work, and it's so important to embrace that, to embrace what we actually can do, because too many people are trying to not only take our money but get us to buy things that are like the bitcoins and stuff like that, but you still need a third party. You need to get online in order to get your bitcoins to be able to trade them. Whereas if you're simply working with people and bartering with your skills and what you can do and making your community run, oh, we'd have healthier food, we'd have happier people, we won't have the centralized BS. We'll have amazing communities globally where you can go and learn different things. It's so amazing that, it's hard for us to even think about how our lives could be so free without being attached to a little piece of paper or gold or a little company script at the end of a week that you hated, but instead to enjoy the fruits of your own labor. That's where we need to go.
Exactly. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what's missing. And you think about that would probably spontaneously form on its own when people get together and have to solve problems. It happens all throughout human history. But when you have this overriding pressure economically all the time to live up to these other expectations or be put in jail because of them, these kinds of like spontaneous things just never occur. There was this black guy from I think he was from Compton. He did a TED talk about how he got sick of seeing all this fast food in his neighborhoods and no access to any where all the white people go, which is like the Trader Joe's and the organic food stores. None of those things existed in his neighborhood. So he went out and he started planting a garden in his lawn and in his sidewalk out in front of his lawn. Of course, what happened? The police came. They're like, you can't grow food here, and he petitioned, and eventually he got a little community going where they grew their own organic food in the hood. So those things happen and can happen. But again, even when he was trying to do that, he was getting squeezed by the powers that be that don't want to see people spontaneously taking ownership, of their own lives in a natural way. But I totally agree. I'm glad you guys are thinking the same. That that's really the direction we got to go. We got to get into a point where we're, using our own time and energy and not always being under this economic pressure to perform. And I feel like the cashless society, it's come up recently. I don't know why. I can't remember exactly what's triggered it, but that's really, I think, a terrifying idea that we're going to be giving away all of our sovereignty at this point to mechanisms online and in banks that can arbitrarily decide how much money is available, how much money isn't available. And it has nothing to do with your own personal skills, your own personal worth, your own ability to create your own wealth through, the resource management that's available. So these are things that I think people will have to start seriously thinking of alternatives for, because again, it's a way to control people, through economics.
Neil Donald Walsh, in one of the books, Conversations with God, I read the three of them, and in one of them he said that in some societies, not of this earth, it's what you give defines how successful you are, not what you have. So the more you give, the more successful you are. So we know that our journey is, service to others. Take care of yourself and service to others. That's part of our journey, to realise that. And we were talking last week, after we did the interview with you, Richard, we did an interview with Joe. And Joe, we were talking about self-awareness. Well, and one of the things I said to Joe was, well, first of all, we start off, we're in the matrix. And then we have to become aware. But I think the next stage of becoming aware is becoming self-aware. Because if you become aware of what's going on when you're outside the matrix, then you have to ask yourself, well, who am I in the scheme of things? Where did I come from? Why am I here? What's the meaning of life? And all these other questions start rushing in.
There you go. And that brings us to self-ownership. When you become self-aware and you really go within, you recognize that the only thing you truly own is your body. The life force that's coming through you is there. It's a gift. So you own your body, and you don't have the right to tell anyone else what to do with their body, unless they're children and you're raising them. But I don't have the right to force my will upon somebody else. I can't murder someone. That's totally against natural law. So why would it be any more legal or moral to have somebody wear a uniform and go kill someone simply because I tell him to? It isn't. And just like taxes, is it moral and righteous for me to sit over here and think, okay, let me form a little group with my buddies here. We're all in on this, and we're going to vote ourselves titles, and we're going to write ourselves up little pieces of paper, and we're going to put ribbons and badges and BS in there. And then because we've got this, now we've been looking over the hill at this other community who's doing very well. We want part of that action. So now that I've got my little group here, and we've convinced all these other bozos to pick up guns to help us force our will, we're going to go into that next county, and we're going to force you to pay us under the guise of protecting you, because if you don't buy into it, We're going to beat the crap out of you, take everything you have, throw you in jail, and possibly murder you. And that's what government is.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically, if you were to do that on your neighbour or somebody, if you were to threaten them or beat them up and steal things from them, you'd go to jail. But because these group of people get together and it's called government, they can do it legally. But it's the same thing. It's still a group of people writing these laws on paper, and because they write them down on paper, they apparently apply to us.
That's why we've got to get to the point where we move beyond paper, beyond badges, and beyond religions. And John, I respect your opinion very much in there. I know that you're a Christian. There are a lot of Christians listening. I think we need to go to the life force itself, because and Max, you're pointing out a flat earth, that's the biggest lie of all. Well, what if the biggest lie, or one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, the biggest one, is that you have to live and sacrifice to die instead of understand your own connection here to this source? Because predating the Jesus theory, and I'm not saying this to hurt anyone, only to allow us to think more, because in my opinion this is more important as well if you want to talk about lies. Okay, Buddha predates Jesus, and Buddha went to the temple at the age of 12, established his wisdom. Buddha and Jesus supposedly fasted in solitude for a long time. Buddha for 47 days, Jesus for 40. Both wandered to a fig tree at the conclusion of their fasts. Both were about the same age when they began their public ministry. Both were killed. You've also got Krishna. He's another god that predates the Jesus theory. You've got Odysseus, who also predates that. You've got Romulus. There is also Dionysus. You have Heracles. You have, let's see, the other one. And I can send you this email if you want. Anyone who wants a copy of this email, I've got these different gods here. Glycon is here. Zoroaster, Zarathustra, Attis of Phyra, and Horus. All of these are predating the Jesus mythology. Now, I do not mean that insultingly at all. I was raised Catholic. I believed very much in Jesus. Then I went through a atheist stage, agnostic stage. I'm spiritual now. I believe in the Christ consciousness, but my intellect will not allow me to believe that Jesus existed as a man. When I look at all the myths that predated Jesus' supposed existence, and I see the similarities and the being killed and rising from the dead and the virgin birth and all of this, and then you see also in Christianity all the pagan deals, the Dagon fish hat that the Pope wears. There's so many things that happen, and in my opinion, they're all to keep us from going inside and plugging in our own divine umbilical cord and seeing what life itself has to offer us inside when we go for the highest good of all. I will to will thy will, regardless of the name, the concepts, and the principles are for protecting life. And if Jesus did exist, I believe very much in the consciousness again. I surround myself always with a white Christ consciousness of love and protection. And Jesus is a strong archetype in my mind and my heart, and part of this God aspect that's so much bigger than I am, and so much more important also, in my opinion, than the myth of whether the earth is flat or not. I would think the myth of a Savior who's going to come back to keep us from saving ourselves would be a bigger lie to break through.
I think we have to save ourselves. I think we are the saviors. We are the people we're waiting on. We just have to wake up and realize what's going on. Now,
well, I think that's the second coming in a nutshell. It's us, basically, coming into our Christ consciousness capabilities, and bringing that out in the physical form. I mean, that's the whole... The Chinese, I think the Chinese consider humans basically a bridge between heaven and earth, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to bring heaven to earth. Along the way comes a lot of ignorance and perhaps other things that don't want to see that happen, and that's why it's a real battle right now to try and make it a reality. But I think it's an inevitable conclusion to a certain chapter, that we are this Christ energy. Somewhere it's latent in our being, and some people's access to it is probably greater than others at certain times. But eventually, I think that's really what the second coming is. It's not a physical Jesus. It's more of us individually as into the occasion.
I agree with that. I did read somewhere, and I'd like to think this is true, maybe, but they did talk about the second coming being the fact that the first coming was Jesus on his own, and he couldn't do it on his own. Obviously, he didn't do it on his own. But the second coming was that the Christ energy will be in all of us as the second coming, and we'll all kind of wake up and be part of the wake-up process. Now, I know there's an awful lot going on with the financial system, and the war is probably going to kick off over in Turkey at the moment. They're all gearing up to go into Syria. And
I heard they were bombing already.
Yeah, they're going in, and then Russia's going to come in. So I think it's all going to go off over there. But I do still see green shoots coming up. I see an awful lot of disclosure coming out, things being exposed, information coming out, and it's like we're on a seesaw at the moment, and it's going to and fro. We sometimes have the upper hand, they have the upper hand, but I do think their back is against the wall because there's so much being exposed. That's the one thing they don't want, is to have the population aware of what's going on, because as soon as people are aware, I mean, I've said it before, in the old days, when I had the OYM website set up, I had a bit of psychology on it, and I talked about the difference between overt and covert. And I said, if it's covert, if somebody's at the bottom of your road in a car watching you 24/7, as long as you don't know they are there, there's nothing you can do about it. You just don't know, so you're carrying on doing what you're doing. But as soon as you find out somebody's watching your house, then you have a choice to do something, whether you want to confront that person. And that's part of the waking up process. You have to be aware of what's going on, and then you can make the choice as to what you want to do about it. And what we have to do is try and wake people up.
Well, that's why I think it's so important that we also, as well as wake people up, that we give them ways and ideas to resist and a day to do it. I mean, can you imagine really what we could do if millions of us stopped the world at the same time? They would not be able to resist. There are too many of us. But until we can really raise our consciousness as well as our moral outrage, I tell you, Ellen, I really believe they are so afraid of our anger. It's why they spent all these years in the Rockefeller money with the New Age movement, trying to defund a lot of that, or to fund it, but to get us out of our anger. To teach us, oh no, forgive. We're going to go in and you're going to forgive everyone and pay your taxes. And the only time, if Jesus existed anyway, that he got angry was at the money changers.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the funny thing people don't. When I talk about that, a lot of people, when I get angry or when I start being a little bit more confrontational, and I'm around a lot of, I would call spiritual types of people, whatnot, I say the F word all the time, and that's sometimes offensive to them as well. But the point I always try to make is, like, think about it. Everyone thinks of Jesus, whether he existed or not, as this peacenik. But the day that he went into that temple, he was kicking some ass. He was tables over. He was not, I'm sure he was using 4-letter words. I don't know what they are in Hebrew, but I seriously doubt he was asking people politely to leave, I mean, he was mad. And he turned water into wine, so he was kind of a partier too, So
I always like that as his first one,
Yeah. So these are the things that, like you said, people were kind of conditioning us to basically just bend over and turn in a cheek. When I don't think Jesus necessarily, I think there's a time and place for everything, and there's a time and place for anger, and it is now. One more thing I want to make is that this is actually this is actually the first time in human history that the peasants have ever had a chance to network with each other. All throughout human history, that's never been the case. We've always been isolated. We've always been in our own little communities, so you couldn't get a good take on what your threats were, what your environment was really like. But now with the internet, which I think has been the best thing that's ever happened to us, we can coordinate now. We can share information. And, of course, that makes us vulnerable, too, if they ever want to shut down the internet. So I don't know.
Well, that's one of the things. That's one of the things they want to do. They want to have the kill switch for the internet because, I think we all know they were hoping to use the internet for propaganda, but it just backfired. And then just the whole level of communication that's gone on out there and everything that's been exposed, it's been fantastic. And even now, the likes of Facebook, YouTube, Google, taking things off the internet because people are reporting things that are happening globally, and they're trying to stifle the information and restrict it and take it down. But people, I know it's kind of probably a cliche from Jurassic Park, but when the guy said nature finds a way, people find a way. They do find a way.
That's true. There are I'm working with a guy right now who's about to put up these little small satellites, these amateur radio satellites. So I'd like to see in the future more of that happening, to where if, say, for instance, they turn off the spigot for the internet, there's still a backup sort of alternative way to communicate that's, not proprietary, that's open source. And I think that's what we're all kind of going towards anyway. But that's an important thing, because the communication that we have now is really what's starting the awakening process and keeping it going for a lot of people. We got to maintain that somehow.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there are kind of, I think it was Greece, where things were getting bad with the internet and they had trouble with communication, and they set up their own Wi-Fi in a village.
Yeah.
So again, nature finds a way. People find a way to do things. When they lose one service or one system, somebody comes up. Don't you say necessity is the root of all inventions?
Yeah, it is. It is. Struggle, invokes these latent possibilities. I think what's hard is that as we process this stuff, this negative stuff gets in our face. And we have to sort of not be overwhelmed by it. We have to face, Starleaf is about facing the darkness, really. Because whenever I faced my own darkness, it was a chance really to also purge it. It doesn't become something that pings around in the back of your mind, corrupting your values or your actions. So we're meant to, I think, face this. I think we're meant to see what can really go wrong with us as well as what can go right with us, and then choose to not be limited anymore by these things. But, until you really see what it is, it's kind of like when the intervention happens for an alcoholic. Until you have those dark, concise moments, and you don't overreact to them, and you see it through, that's when your freedom starts. And we're having to take a look at this. I think it's an outdated animal paradigm of control that, however useful it might be to some degree, it's no longer useful now. Where we're at a point now where we could have our freedom, we could use our common sense, we could see the shared value and not exploiting each other. That could all really happen. That world could really form. But as we're butting up against that, there are people out there, these elites, who have just gotten so used to doing it the old animal way of doing things that they have no idea how to step into their own freedom or power, and perhaps they're just too corrupted to do it. And you know what? You got to get angry, and you got to say no to these people. And if it requires a little bit of fighting, that's what you do. You have that. That's part of your nature too, But here's the problem: you don't make this. The problem with them, and the problem with the fighting that they do, is they institutionalize it. That's different than in nature when you get into a fight and you move on.
Yeah.
Here what we have is we have that anger being corrupted, and now it's used to trigger our basest emotions that make us fight wars that never end, that have nothing to do with, protecting yourself. They have everything to do with institutionalizing a way to make money and to exploit people. So our animal instincts are there to serve us, but not to imprison us, which is what I think what happens when you create these governments, and these governments use these baser instincts to control people.
Well, sheep in the field are not free. We might have this perception of freedom because we can walk around the field. But when we get to the edge of the field, we see there's a fence there. We can't go any further. And I think people need to wake up to that. Just because they can get in the car and drive around and do the things they can do. I mean, we are in an open-air prison. That's really, and people need to realise that. And then it's all got to do with the revenue. It's all got to do with the money. They want the money. And they keep coming out with tax after tax after tax. And they find different ways to try and get money out of people. And that will continue, because I've said it before on the show, the hierarchical system doesn't work because there's too many, one person can have control over the many just through that system. And and the thing is, the system won't change because the elites are getting what they want. And if they're getting what they want from the current system, why would they want to change it?
That's why we've got to stop obeying, stop paying, because it's all about breaking the bank. They're breaking our backs as they're breaking also our banks. And we can take our power back, because if you're following at all the stock markets, that Baltic Dry Index, where definitely the shipping is drying up, there's so many things that are pointing to us being totally wiped out. Again, think about 69 million of us only living here in the United States in 2025. The government tells us that, and government is just a label for a group of people who are self-vested and who have nothing to do with us except for they're serving us all right as the main course for their greed. And we've got to stop allowing that to happen and stop participating and start demanding accountability, but we have to do it en masse. So I'm watching to see what happens here in Oregon, because I'm very proud of Ammon Bundy and his father, although there's a bigger picture there. But these people, they went out to other places to make their stand, and now they've left their homes vulnerable. So in my opinion, the best thing we can do is stay local and understand that no one can protect our family like we can.
Excellent.
You know, what's interesting about the Bundy situations, I live in Seattle, right? And Seattle's full of a lot of really progressive liberal people who sort of look down on what those guys did, and they kind of make fun of them and blah blah blah. And I look at them and I'm like, you guys got to understand something. Like, regardless of whether you believe in all of their politics or whatever, you got to understand that the federal government, the reason why they showed up there is that the federal government does bully people and steal their land. And when they steal their land, they're not turning it into like these beautiful parks that you like to think that they're going to turn them into and create all this natural habitat. A lot of times they license them out to international companies for fracking, for, just whatever, corrupting the environment. So it's funny how like people get sort of conditioned to think along these very simple black and white terms. Oh, these guys are like crazy libertarians who, don't believe in this or whatever. But they never take a minute just to see, well, why did they really show up? And can it still resonate with me? Because it does. I mean, the federal government is buying up all of this land. It is stealing it from these people, from private owners. And it isn't always turning into some benign paradise where everybody sits around eating chia seeds together and meditating. Like, they actually turn it into places where they sell it off to international companies. And a lot of these progressive types would totally be against anyway. So that's the problem, I think, with a lot of this stuff when it goes down, is that it gets pitched a certain way to either a Democrat or to a Republican or whoever, and you only see it through that party or that ideology, instead of taking a step back and going, well, what is the common ground here, and how might I still identify with what they're doing? Because I supported what they were doing, because I know personally from what I've read that that's a huge problem with the BLM. They go in, they steal the stuff, and they say that it's for some progressive enterprise, but often it's not. It's for exploitation of the natural environment.
Of course.
It's always for that. They're alphabet gangs, carving us up.
And that's probably part of the part of the game and part of the corruption. But listen, Richard, we've reached that time. We're going to have to wrap things up there. But a big thank you for coming on. Now, before we get your details, we have this thing on the OYM chat called the virtual pub crawl. And Chris is in charge. He's the barman, and Chris is in charge. And Chris has invited you and Karen onto a virtual pub crawl. So you have
I just don't want to crawl.
Feel on it. Well, after a few beers, you might be.
You might be crawling. Yeah, the Irish involves crawling sooner or later.
That's exactly, yeah. So well, either crawling or singing,
I'm Irish, And Richard, I loved Starleaf, and I really loved your character the best. Nice twirling your gun there, pal.
I had to practice that a lot. I'm actually in the sequel, I'm going to get a Winchester out.
Excellent.
Start twirling that thing.
Well, what we'll do is...
I figured it took a long time. You did an excellent job, and I really loved the movie. I want to get a copy, to tell you the truth. It was great.
I'll send you an autographed copy.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Let's find out from Richard. Richard, give us all your contact details and where people can find out about your Starleaf film that you've done.
Yeah, the easiest thing is probably starleafmovie.com, and it has access to our Twitter, our Facebook, and our Instagram. So if you go to starleafmovie.com, you'll get all the information you need, and I can always be reached. I think it's Richard at TitanskyEntertainment.com. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Brilliant. And maybe sometime in the near future, this virtual pub crawl might happen in some form, Well, I tell you, it'd be a room full of people because it would be jam-packed, But, all right, Richard, stay with us there for a minute. I'm going to go off to a musical break, and we'll be back after this. Thanks for coming on. Karen, if you want to say goodbye to Richard there.
I do, Richard. It's been very nice meeting you, and I would definitely love to connect on Skype because I've got some other ideas I'd kind of like to run by you. And great job. I totally love Starleaf.
I really appreciate you hearing that. Yeah, I want to connect as well. Are we going to hear you sing at some point, or is that happening later?
Well, I'll tell you what. If Karen can do it now...
Sure.
Yeah, if you do it now, and then we'll go to a musical break after that.
All right. Well, now I haven't used this headset before, so I'm not going to be able to pull the mic back, but it's basically little kind of lyrics and stories and melodies kind of come through me. And this one is called In the Bankground, BANKGROUND, because I think it's not about your background. It's about how much money do you have, you know. Everything's about money, and I personally resent that very much. So, all right, and let's see. Chris, you asked for this earlier, so here is In the Bankground. I want to tell you a story, but you won't understand how all of the chaos is very well planned. In the background, where money is king, in the background, you buy and sell everything. In the background, on your knees, kiss the ring. It's in the background. I want to tell you a tale, and it isn't a fable. You and your family are all on the table. In the background, where is the money they hide? In the background, your loan is denied. In the background, better swallow your pride. It's in the background. People full of their titles, badges and buttons are serving us up like a fat bunch of muttons. You can cry like a baby, but that won't save you. Keep paying your taxes, they only enslave you. In the background, where money is king, in the background, you buy and sell everything. In the background, on your knees, kiss the ring. It's in the background, the Jews own everything. In the background, or is the Pope really king? In the background, the Jesuits pass him the ring. It's in the background.
Very good. Okay, we're going to go over to a musical break. That's brilliant, Karen. We'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
Now we're back. Well done to Karen for doing the singing. Well done, Karen.
Thank you very much. I get a kick out of it. I like the words. I never feel like I write these, though. I kind of find them, or they find me.
Yeah, no, very good. We just talking there during the musical break about getting the song actually on the track with some musical background. So something that we talked about, didn't we?
Yeah, you know, and we'll figure it out. Actually, too, Alan, I realized Al picked up an old keyboard here that has a drum machine in it, so I can start playing around on that and maybe email you something there, and then you can take out that track and put real drums in. It'd be great to have a song that we can come up with long distance, you know. Yeah,
well, again, I can send you over the drum rhythm just to give you something to work with on the click.
Just beat it.
I'll use a bit of software first, then I'll put the proper one on. Well, that was great information from Richard, I have to say. Great information, and a great having a chat about talking about everything. I'm trying to look at everything that's going on globally, from the financial system to, the ships not moving, to the war over in Turkey. Obviously, they're going to start, if not they've started already. Russia's going to jump in. And all these kind of predictions of things going to happen. And I do seriously think that people really, really need to be watching what's going on. There's no reason why the banks are having major problems, especially Deutsche Bank. They're having major problems, and the stocks are just dropping like unbelievable, like a brick, and people need to be aware, and really need to be stocking up on food if you can afford it. And just be ready, at least have 4 weeks, because as Pastor William said, the people who are struggling won't rebel, and we are all struggling, and we are finding it trying hard to rebel. So what we have to do is at least make sure that your family, that you have food, because if you're hungry, you can't think. At least if you have food and you've eaten something, then you can think and you can decide what you're going to do. And this is where the time banking comes in. There's no point running around like a headless chicken going, well, like some people do in a plane, we're going to crash. How is that going to help people? You have to sit down logically and go, okay, right, if I get food in, at least for 3 or 4 weeks, that gives me time to think. It means I can speak to the neighbours, speak to people, and try and get something together, because guaranteed, if the system did go down, and again, I recommend people go over and see the American Blackout. It's a National Geographic documentary on YouTube, and it gives you the what if scenario. And if there's an EMP or CMA or the banks go down, you can't get money out, and they go down and stay closed, as in not like Greece where they opened up a week later, but they stay closed, then you have to ask yourself, what would you do? Seriously, yeah. I mean, I think people need to do that.
Well, and that's exactly why, in my opinion, we need to prioritize. And whether or not we're on a flat earth or not, we still need water filters. We need to get guns and ammo if possible, or think of other ways to protect ourselves. We need to network within our families. We need to network with people in uniforms. We need to look in the mirror and decide what it is that we can give that will help us. What can we provide? What gifts do we have that we can allow to unfold when we let right action flow through us?
Definitely. Now, I just want to do a reminder on a couple of things I said at the start of the show, just to let people know. Again, the Pain Genie seminar is on next week. That's on the 21stcenturyenergymedicine.com website. Plus the fact that if you mention, there's 4 spaces left. If you mention OYM, you'll get the actual course for half price. You need to contact Richard for that on the website I just read out there. And also in Dingle, in the Skellig Hotel at 8 p.m. on the Friday, there's going to be a great seminar. As far as I know, it's free. There's going to be a great seminar called The Truth About Cancer and Its Resolution. The seminar will be by expert in the field of resolving cancer naturally. I recommend, if you're in the area or you can get down to Dingle, head down there, because I have a funny feeling in my waters that he's going to be talking about GCMAF, which the vaccines tend to affect in our body and switch it off from, right. If my history serves me well, from research that I've done.
Alan, does the Pain Genie work on one individual at a time, or can you actually work on more than one?
Yeah, you can work on as many people as you want.
No, I mean at the same time. I don't mean like individually, but can you work on a group of people or just one individually at a time?
No, it's only one person at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
I know it's into energy and stuff, and it's interesting too. You had, I think, Stephanie on, who also talks about manipulating energy. So one of these days I'd like to talk to someone like that too, and about that 10%, and the vibration, because it does that make sense to you? If we can start holding that and get people to embrace their anger instead of run from it?
Yeah, but I think you have to be constructive with it. I think that energy, the anger and the energy has to be focused.
Right.
There's no point
just for motivating.
Yeah.
Right action,
Exactly. Yeah, there's no point sitting down and sitting in the anger and doing nothing and just being angry. I think you have to motivate yourself and say, right, I'm not putting up with this. I'm going to see what I can do. Like we've said before, joining the likes of local groups like the National Land League or the Hub, and going down to court and getting involved with groups and helping. That's a challenge. That's a channeled anger, but in a positive way. So
that's
I think
exactly right.
I think that's what we need to do, rather than, because you can actually, that anger could eat you up if you just sit down and let it. So I think we need to channel that anger and put it into something positive. And we can all do something. And the trouble is, doing something takes energy, and the food that we eat, the processed food that we get, takes our energy away because we don't feel like doing anything. And that's part of the plan as well.
It is. And the television. Turn off the television. And even though I know the 15th is tomorrow, what can you do? Can you go to the bank and take out your money? And hopefully you've already done that. Or if you haven't, remember that the banks now own your money, and you can't get it out all at once unless it's in small amounts and increments. So please, at the very least, take possession of the assets you believe you own that are not now in your possession.
Exactly. Now, just a couple of things before we finish up. Next week, I might not be on the air. Chances are I won't be because I'll be down in Kerry. Steve's going to be taking over and doing the show. And next week we're going to have Mick from Liffey Sound FM and Sean McGuire from People's Internet Radio. And both Mick and Sean do their own show. Mick has a show on Monday nights on Liffey Sound FM at 9 p.m. and Sean does his show on Wednesday nights on People's Internet Radio at 9 p.m. I believe as well. Two great shows. And the show is going to be called the Election Special. Steve is going to talk to Mick and Sean all about the elections, the government, what's going on. Again, something I've seen today with Enda Kenny, with all the guards around him and everybody having a go at Enda Kenny, calling him a traitor and everything else. He's probably one of the most despised Taoiseachs in Ireland, in Irish history, the way things are at the moment. I've never ever seen that before. And so, next week is going to be an election special show, and that's what they're going to be talking about. The other thing, very quickly, I just want to mention as well, I don't know whether you've tried this, Karen, but I got some apple cider vinegar. I heard about the benefits. Again, if you go over to Facebook and have a look at the article I wrote about apple cider vinegar and the YouTube video, and I've got it. And
organic?
Organic, yeah, it's raw, unfiltered, organic with Mother. Apparently Mother has all the enzymes. And so far I've been very impressed with the results. But I'm going to give it another week or so and then report.
How are you taking it?
Report back. Just in it, basically I take spring water. I take a large spoonful of apple cider vinegar because it is a vinegar. It smells of vinegar. And then I use organic cranberry juice on top of that, just to dull the actual taste. And then I take that.
Yeah, my husband just takes a big tablespoon. I will have to get back into it. I haven't. I use it in coleslaws and stuff, but I know organic apple cider vinegar is really good for you in a lot of ways.
No, I've been taking it for 3 days now, and I have to say, the initial impression is very good, but I won't know till after about a week. I need to give it about a week. Sorry?
What does it seem to be doing now that you're benefiting from?
I'm just feeling a bit better, not when when you eat sometimes you feel a bit bloated, and I don't feel that really. Since the last 3 days I've been taking it.
Just once a day?
Just once a day with a teaspoon, yeah. And
in the morning or any time in particular that you're taking it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to take it now at night without food and then go to bed. That's what I'm trying to do. Originally, when I started it, I was taking it with food, and it didn't seem to agree with that. Maybe it's because it's a vinegar and it's got to do with the alkaline acid content. Now, I also got pH strips, which is to test your alkaline and acid from a company on Amazon. And you can get them strips pretty cheap. And it's always good to, check your urine and your saliva just to check your acid content as well. So again, it's all kind of part and parcel of what I'm trying to do, but I'm just looking at the time and we've just run out of time there. But I'll just say, if you want to say a quick goodbye, Karen?
All right, I want to say thank you to everybody in the chat room and respect to everyone in the chat room, even though I don't necessarily agree with all the opinions and things there. I think we need to prioritize. And you can find out more about how I think at UnitedWeStrike.com. I update my blog page. Thank you, Alan, for the great work you've done on that. Thank you for posting that homage to Charlie McGrath, who I will continue to miss, but it's nice to see his happy face on there. And thanks to Detlef for creating that. Listen to the United We Strike podcast. Make sure to catch Deborah Tavares to know what's going on. And try to do what you can, please, to be that 10% who spreads and honors the 15th as well as your moral outrage. Own it, embrace it, take it to right action.
Excellent stuff. Okay, from myself, Alan James, take it easy. Have a good week. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.
Open your mind.